Okay, let's set the scene. It's August 9th, 1945, early morning in Nagasaki. And for most people there, it probably felt, well, almost ordinary, strangely enough.
That's right. You'd hear the sounds, the usual city noises, streetcars clanging, maybe fishermen down at the bay, the big Mitsubishi shipyards humming with activity.
And the smell, too, I imagine. Coal smoke, sea air, just a regular working port city.
Exactly. Kids going to school, workers heading to the factories, and in the Urakami Valley, you'd hear the church bells, the big cathedral there.
Just life carrying on, despite the war. But high above the Pacific, something else was happening, something that would change everything.
Indeed. Thousands of feet up, an American B-29 bomber, the Boxcar, was already well on its way from Tinian Island.
And it wasn't carrying conventional bombs.
No, it was carrying a weapon codenamed Fat Man, a plutonium bomb. Something the world, except for a handful of scientists and military planners, couldn't even conceive of.
And the precedent had just been set, hadn't it? Just 3 days before.
Hiroshima, August 6th. That event made the second mission, well, almost inevitable in the minds of the U.S. command.
So that's our focus for this deep dive, that stark contrast. The ordinary lives below, the extraordinary, terrifying mission above. We want to trace how Nagasaki became the target, the science behind that second bomb, the sheer devastation, and ultimately, how this event forced Japan's hand.
It's the story of the last normal morning Nagasaki would ever know.
Let's start on the ground then. Nagasaki was a key industrial city, right? Mitsubishi was huge there.
Absolutely vital. They were building warships, torpedoes, a major hub for the Japanese war effort. From an Allied perspective, it was a completely legitimate military target.
But you mentioned people felt strangely secure. Why? Weren't they expecting raids?
Well, they were used to sirens. They'd had reconnaissance planes fly over quite a lot. But unlike Tokyo or Osaka, which had suffered these massive, devastating firebombing campaigns, Nagasaki had been mostly spared.
Any particular reason?
Partly geography. The city's nestled in these steep valleys, which made the kind of carpet bombing with incendiaries maybe less effective, or at least less prioritized, than on flatter cities.
So the warnings would sound, planes might fly over, maybe drop leaflets, but then nothing major happened.
Exactly. And over time, that built this false sense of security, a kind of dangerous comfort almost. People started to think, maybe Nagasaki would be spared the worst. Maybe they'd get through it. It's chilling to think about that. So 7 a.m. that morning, factory whistles blow, people head to work, farmers are out in the fields nearby, and those cathedral bells are ringing in the Urakami Valley for morning prayers. Life just ticks on.
Well, Boxcar's getting closer. What was the mood like on the plane?
Exhausted, I'd imagine. They'd been briefed the night before. Major Charles Sweeney leading the mission. They knew the historical significance. They were told they were carrying something that would, quote, alter history forever.
And this bomb, Fat Man, was different from Hiroshima's little boy. How so?
Visually, it was quite different. Shorter, much rounder, bulbous, hence the name, Fat Man. It was heavier too. But the real difference was inside. It used plutonium, not uranium.
And that mattered why?
It required a completely different, much more complicated trigger mechanism. More powerful, potentially, but also much harder to get right.
So as people in Nagasaki are starting their day completely unaware, their city is listed as the secondary target.
That's right. The primary was a city called Kokura. The final decision, Kokura or Nagasaki, would literally come down to what the weather was like over each city.
Just the luck of the draw, or the unluck.
The fate of tens of thousands hanging on clouds and wind.
Let's talk about that mission plan. They get briefed on Tinian Island. Sweeney, the commander, Kermit Bay, the bombardier, sealed orders. It must have felt surreal.
Absolutely. This wasn't just another bombing run. This was Act 2 of the nuclear age. Only a very small number of people truly understood the physics, the mechanics of what they carried, but everyone knew Hiroshima had happened.
They knew this worked.
They knew it worked. And they knew they had another one. It was proof it wasn't a one-off fluke.
And this Fat Man, nearly 11,000 pounds. You said the plutonium made it complex. Why couldn't they use the same simple design as the Hiroshima bomb?
Good question. Plutonium-239 is just different. It's more unstable. If you tried the little boy method, basically firing one piece of nuclear material into another like a cannon, the plutonium would start reacting too early. It would pre-detonate.
So you wouldn't get the big explosion.
Yes, a fizzle?
Exactly. A fizzle. A catastrophic failure, wasting the bomb and the mission. So they needed a different approach.
Implosion. How does that work? You squeeze it.
Basically, yes. You need to compress a sphere of plutonium, the core, incredibly fast and with perfect uniformity. Squeeze it from all sides at once until it reaches critical mass.
And how do you achieve that perfect squeeze?
With conventional explosives, actually, but very precisely shaped ones. Imagine the plutonium core surrounded by 32 separate blocks of high explosives. They called them lenses.
Lenses, because they were shaped to focus the blast wave inwards, like a lens focuses light. And they all had to detonate at exactly the same instant. We're talking microsecond precision.
Wow. If the timing was off even slightly.
The squeeze wouldn't be uniform, the plutonium wouldn't go critical properly, another fizzle. The engineering challenge was immense.
But they knew it could work because of the Trinity test, right?
Yeah.
Just weeks before in New Mexico.
Precisely. July 16th. Trinity was the proof of concept for this incredibly complex implosion design. It worked spectacularly. So the boxcar crew, they weren't flying with an untested theory. They were flying with the proven, more powerful design.
That must have added to the weight of it all.
Yeah.
Knowing you have the most destructive thing ever built.
Yeah.
And it's the advanced model.
Absolutely. You have the military orders, the justification ending the war quickly, saving lives potentially lost in an invasion, but you also have the undeniable knowledge of the sheer power you're about to unleash. And the primary target, Kokura. Like Kokura. It had one of Japan's largest army arsenals, huge military factories, a very significant strategic target.
And Nagasaki was the backup. But the crucial rule, the absolute must-do, was visual confirmation. Right. No dropping by radar.
Strict orders. They had to see the target aiming point. It wasn't just about hitting the city. It was about hitting the designated ground zero accurately to maximize the bomb's effects and, frankly, to demonstrate its terrifying precision.
Yeah.
Dropping blind, risk missing, wasting the weapon, undermining the psychological impact.
So Captain Bay, the bombardier, his eyes were critical.
His eyes and the weather. The fate of two cities rested on whether he could get a clear view through his bomb site.
Which brings us to Kokura. Boxcar arrives. And they can't see it. Kokura is just socked in, covered.
Just bad weather, clouds.
It was a mix of things, apparently. There was the usual morning haze, then smoke drifting over from nearby Yahata, which had been bombed recently by conventional means. And crucially, the Japanese were actively creating smoke screens over important targets. They were burning coal, other materials, deliberately trying to obscure the view.
A defensive measure that actually worked in this case. It worked perfectly that day for Kokura. Captain Bay is searching through the bomb site. Nothing. Just haze and smoke. He can't get a lock on the arsenal.
And Sweeney, the pilot, he can't just wait around forever, can he? And this is where another problem bites them. Fuel. They'd already had issues before takeoff with a fuel transfer pump. They were running lower on fuel than planned before they even got to Japan.
Oh, wow. So circling wasn't really an option.
He did circle. Once, twice, 3 times. Each pass burning precious fuel, tension rising on the flight deck. You can imagine the frustration. They have this ultimate weapon, they're right over the target, but they can't drop it because of smoke.
That's incredible. Kokura gets spared by smoke and clouds. The luck of Kokura, they called it later.
Indeed. But Kokura's luck was Nagasaki's doom. Sweeney looks at his fuel gauges. They're approaching the point of no return. If they wait any longer, they might not make it back, or even to an emergency landing zone like Okinawa.
So he has to make the call.
You have to. Abandon the primary, proceed to the secondary target, turn south, head for Nagasaki. A city that was, until that moment, just a backup plan.
Suddenly, it's ground zero.
Okay, as they fly south, let's go back to Fat Man itself. We talked about the implosion, the 32 lenses, that complex design. It was also a strategic statement, wasn't it?
Very much so. Dropping Little Boy, uranium gun type on Hiroshima, and then Fat Man, plutonium implosion type, on Nagasaki just 3 days later sent an unmistakable message.
Which was?
It wasn't just we have an atomic bomb, it was we have mastered multiple ways to build atomic bombs and we likely have more. It erased any doubt that Hiroshima might have been a one-off, a lucky shot. It demonstrated a terrifying industrial and scientific capability.
No room for skepticism in Tokyo or Moscow, for that matter.
Precisely, and this one was designed to be more powerful. Expected yield was around 21 kilotons of TNT equivalent. Hiroshima's was estimated around 15.
So bigger blast, more heat, more radiation.
Significantly more. And inside that olive green shell, just over 6 kilograms, about 14 pounds of plutonium-239 at the core. Highly unstable stuff.
How did they keep it safe during the flight? It wasn't armed the whole time, surely.
No, absolutely not. The final arming sequence happens closer to the target. There were multiple safety wires and checks. Commander Frederick Ashworth, the weaponer on board, his job was crucial. Constantly checking the circuits, making sure everything was ready, but not too ready until the final moment.
Flying with that The responsibility.
Unimaginable. Knowing that perfect symmetry was required for it to work, and utter catastrophe if it didn't.
And then there's Nagasaki's geography. You mentioned it was hilly in valleys. How did that play into what was about to happen?
It was tragically significant. Unlike Hiroshima's flat plain, Nagasaki is characterized by these steep ridges separating different parts of the city. This meant some areas, shielded by the hills, actually had a degree of protection from the blast. But the main target area, the Urakami Valley, where the big factories, the medical college, the prison, and the Urakami Cathedral were located, was like a channel.
So the hills would contain the blast.
Worse, they'd reflect and amplify it. The shockwave would bounce off the valley walls, concentrating the destructive energy right onto the valley floor, where tens of thousands of people lived and worked. The geography itself was poised to make the devastation even worse in that specific area. Okay, so Boxcar arrives over Nagasaki. Around 10:50 a.m., bomb bay doors open. And the clouds are still a problem. Again, frustratingly, yes. Much of the city is obscured. Sweeney and Behan are facing the real possibility of having to abort the entire mission. Fuel is critical now. They have to drop or head home immediately.
The pressure must have been immense.
Then, just as they're about to give up, Behan spots it. A gap. A brief, fleeting break in the clouds.
Just enough. Just enough. It wasn't the primary aiming point they had briefed, which was further south near the harbor. This break was over the Urakami Valley near the Mitsubishi Steel and Arms Works. Close enough. Behan locks on, shouts, "Bomb away!" at 11:01 a.m., and Fat Man begins its fall. 43 seconds.
43 seconds. Imagine seeing that from the ground. A single object drifting down under a parachute. Not like a typical bombing run. Probably confusing, maybe not immediately alarming to everyone who saw it.
02 a.m.
At 1,650 feet above the valley floor, the 32 lenses fire in perfect synchrony. The plutonium core implodes, achieves supercriticality, and detonates.
The descriptions are just horrific. A flash brighter than the sun.
Instantaneous heat, estimated at nearly 4,000 degrees Celsius at ground zero. Steel melts. Stone vaporizes. People closest to the hypocenter simply cease to exist.
Leaving only shadows burned on the steps or walls.
Those eerie, permanent silhouettes. Further out, concrete buildings pulverized. Wooden houses just explode into flames simultaneously. The Urakami Cathedral, the largest church in East Asia, just collapses into a ruin of scorched stone in an instant.
And from the plane, what did the crew see?
They saw the mushroom cloud, this boiling, terrifying column of fire, smoke, and debris erupting upwards, climbing tens of thousands of feet, a horrifying spectacle of their weapon's success.
But below, chaos amplified by the terrain.
The valley acted like a pressure cooker. The shockwave slammed into the hills and bounced back, reinforcing the destruction. Entire neighborhoods vanished. Schools, hospitals, gone. Roughly 70% of the city's structures destroyed or damaged beyond repair in moments.
Yeah.
And then came the firestorm.
Fires merging together.
Yes, creating this massive inferno that consumes oxygen, making it impossible to breathe even if you survived the initial blast and heat. Nagasaki's unique layout made the destruction in the Urakami Valley particularly devastating.
Just unimaginable. What was it like for the survivors? The immediate aftermath.
A living hell. The accounts from the Habakusha, the survivors, are harrowing. People staggering through the ruins, clothes burned off, skin hanging in shreds.
You hear about people holding their arms out.
Yes, because the burned skin contracted and fused, making it agony to lower them. Severe burns, horrific blast injuries, the patterns of clothing sometimes seared onto people's bodies by the thermal flash.
And the landscape itself.
Utter devastation, blackened, smoking ruins, corpses everywhere, some frozen in the position they were in when the blast hit, the air thick with dust and the smell of burning, roof tiles melted into glassy puddles, industrial fires raging out of control.
And help, medical aid.
Wiped out. The main hospitals and medical facilities were in the Urakami Valley, right near ground zero. They were destroyed instantly. Doctors, nurses, supplies, gone.
So there was no organized relief effort initially.
Just makeshift stations set up by whoever survived, but they were overwhelmed immediately. No clean water. The rivers were contaminated, some reportedly boiling hot near the hypocenter. People desperate for water risked drowning or scalding.
And then came the invisible killer, radiation.
Something nobody really understood at the time. Days, weeks later, people who seemed to have survived the blast relatively unharmed started getting sick.
What were the symptoms?
Uncontrollable vomiting, bleeding from the gums and under the skin, high fevers, terrible weakness, hair falling out in clumps, radiation sickness, a silent internal destruction.
The psychological trauma must have been immense too. Surviving that, than seeing loved ones succumb to this mystery illness.
Absolutely. The silence that fell after the initial screams and chaos, survivors described it as profoundly disturbing. A city stunned into silence. August 9th wasn't just a date for them, it was the day their world ended.
While this horror is unfolding in Nagasaki, what's happening in Tokyo? How did the leadership react? Remember, they'd already had Hiroshima 3 days earlier.
Their reaction to Hiroshima had been, well, denial, mostly. The Imperial General Headquarters, the military leadership, just couldn't accept that a single bomb could do that much damage. They dismissed it as propaganda or maybe a very large conventional bomb.
They were clinging to their worldview.
Exactly. Pride, ideology, they couldn't process it. But then came the news from Nagasaki, another city devastated by another single bomb. And this one, they quickly learned, was a different type of bomb.
That had to shatter the denial.
It did. Suddenly, it wasn't an anomaly. It was an arsenal. The U.S. could do this, apparently at will. The news hit Tokyo while the Supreme War Council, the top 6 leaders, were already locked in agonized debate.
What were they debating? Surely surrender was on the table after Hiroshima.
It was, but the council was split. 3 wanted to find a way to surrender, likely accepting the Allied terms from the Potsdam Declaration, provided the emperor's position was safe. But 3 others, the War Minister Anami, the Army and Navy Chiefs of Staff, were hardliners.
What was their argument for continuing?
Honor, defiance, and a belief they could still inflict massive casualties on any U.S. invasion force. They hoped to force a negotiated peace, better terms, and unconditional surrender. They were also pinning faint hopes on the Soviet Union mediating for them.
Nagasaki must have pulled the rug out from under that argument.
Completely. The demonstration of repeatable, overwhelming power made the idea of resisting an invasion seem suicidal. It wasn't just about losing territory anymore, it was about the potential annihilation of Japan itself. The psychological blow was immense. Rumors of these hell weapons spread terror.
So the bombs didn't just destroy cities, they destroyed the leadership's confidence, their strategic rationale.
Made the risk undeniable. Continuing the war was no longer strategically viable, only ideologically driven by the hardliners. The debate shifted not if surrender, but how, and crucially, what happened to the emperor.
And as if Nagasaki wasn't enough, something else major happened right around the same time, didn't it?
The other hammer blow. While Tokyo was reeling from Nagasaki on August 9th, they were also dealing with the fact that the day before, August 8th, the Soviet Union had declared war on Japan.
The mediation hope. Gone.
Utterly shattered. Japan had desperately hoped Stalin would remain neutral, maybe broker a deal. Instead, he declared war.
And it wasn't just a declaration, was it?
No. In the early hours of August 9th, the very same morning, boxcar was flying towards Kokura and Nagasaki, a massive Soviet force. Over 1 million soldiers poured across the border into Japanese-occupied Manchuria.
A huge invasion.
Overwhelming. The Japanese Quantum Army there, once formidable, was now depleted and couldn't stop the Red Army's advance. It was swift, brutal.
So Japan is facing atomic annihilation from the air and a massive ground invasion from the Soviets.
It was a complete disaster on 2 fronts. And the Soviet threat carried a particular terror for the Japanese elite.
Why?
Fear of communism, yes, but more immediately, fear for the emperor. They felt an American occupation might possibly allow the imperial system to continue in some form. But a Soviet occupation? That almost certainly meant the end of the emperor, maybe his trial, and a total restructuring of Japanese society.
So this combination, Nagasaki proving the U.S. had the power to obliterate them, the Soviets proving military defeat was total and imminent. It left the hardliners with nothing.
Pretty much stripped away their final arguments. Japan was encircled, facing destruction from multiple angles. There was no viable path forward except surrender.
Yet, the War Council was still deadlocked, even after all this.
Incredibly, yes. August 10th, they meet again. Still 3 for surrender, accepting Potsdam, conditional on the emperor. 3 against, demanding more conditions, essentially refusing. They were paralyzed.
Which led to something completely unprecedented in Japanese history.
The emperor's intervention, Emperor Hirohito. Traditionally, he was seen as divine, above politics, reigning but not ruling. He never directly intervened in government decisions like this.
But this time was different.
He summoned the council, he listened to the deadlock, and then he spoke. He sided with the faction wanting to surrender. He said he couldn't bear to see his people suffer any further. He explicitly mentioned the atomic bombs and the devastation.
His reasoning was the suffering.
He said continuing the war would mean the ultimate collapse and obliteration of the Japanese nation, the extinction of human civilization. He ordered them to accept the Allied terms, with the sole condition that the emperor's constitutional status be preserved.
And his word was final.
His word broke the deadlock. It was unthinkable to defy the emperor's direct command. The decision was made.
Which led to the famous radio broadcast on August 15th, the first time most Japanese people ever heard his voice.
The Jewel voice broadcast, the Jokwan Hushi, it was recorded in secret, smuggled out of the palace past some radical officers who tried to stage a coup to stop the surrender.
Wow, even then there was resistance.
A desperate last stand by some hardliners, but it failed. The recording is broadcast. The emperor's voice itself was a shock, high-pitched, formal, using archaic language many didn't fully understand.
And he didn't actually say surrender, did he?
No, the language was very indirect, very careful to save face. He spoke of the war situation developing not necessarily to Japan's advantage and having to endure the unendurable and suffer what is insufferable. But he did reference the enemy using a new and most cruel bomb.
The message was clear enough, though.
Oh, yes. People gathered around radios, listened in stunned silence, and then widespread weeping. The realization that the war, the suffering, was finally over. It was a moment of profound national trauma and relief.
And that set the stage for the formal surrender.
September 2nd, 1945, aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, the signing of the Instrument of Surrender, World War II officially ends.
So looking back, Nagasaki, combined with the Soviet invasion, it was the final, decisive blow.
It seems undeniable. It forced the emperor's hand, broke the military deadlock, but we have to remember the human cost that continued long after. The hibakusha, the survivors of Nagasaki and Hiroshima, lived with the physical scars, the radiation effects, the psychological trauma for the rest of their lives.
And many became powerful advocates for peace, didn't they?
Absolutely. Their testimony is a crucial part of the legacy, a constant reminder of the horrors of nuclear war. Which brings us to the debate that still exists. Was Nagasaki necessary? After Hiroshima, with the Soviets invading, was it overkill? That's the agonizing question, isn't it? The argument for yes usually centers on saving lives that without the second bomb, Japan's military might have fought on, leading to a bloody U.S. invasion costing potentially millions of lives, both American and Japanese. Nagasaki shocked them into surrendering faster.
But the argument against
is that Japan was already effectively beaten. Hiroshima had demonstrated the power, the Soviets were attacking, maybe surrender was imminent anyway. Some argue Nagasaki was less about ending the war with Japan and more about sending a message to Stalin, demonstrating U.S. power for the post-war world, the start of the Cold War.
A warning shot to the Soviets.
That's one interpretation. There's no easy answer, and historians still debate it fiercely.
But what's not debatable is the outcome. Nagasaki was the second, and so far, the last city ever to experience a nuclear attack in wartime.
And that fact hangs over us still. It marked the full entry into the nuclear age. That day, the power unleashed over the Urakami Valley showed humanity had achieved the means of its own annihilation.
A terrifying power that demands, as you said, constant vigilance. The fact that these weapons haven't been used in war since 1945 is, well, maybe the fragile, enduring legacy of that horrific morning in Nagasaki.
Let's hope it remains that way. A lesson learned, however brutally,